get sugar-coated. And just so you know, it's a good day to be a soldier.
What's going on? Apparently, some of the Trump agendas with regards to Israel has changed, man. I feel like I got a big crick in my neck today. But they've changed. So let's listen in and find out what matter has changed, because accordingly, I think that they should. As Iran seems to, not don't own the culture in which it stands on. Iran is pretty much being Iran. So let's listen up. Let's see what's going on.
On the Iran negotiations, Alex.
Hey, good morning to you both. The U.S. and Iran plan to hold talks this weekend in Islamabad. Vice President Vance leading those, as President Trump says U.S. forces will remain in the region until a lasting peace agreement is made. He wrote this, quote, all U.S. ships, aircraft, and military personnel with additional ammunition, weaponry, and anything else that is appropriate and necessary for the lethal prosecution and destruction of an already substantially degraded enemy will remain in place and around Iran until such time as the real agreement reached is fully complied with. Now, the current ceasefire does remain fragile, as you said. Iran claims that it has already been breached by Israeli strikes on Lebanon targeting Hezbollah. The Iranian-backed militant group vowed to continue attacks on Israel. In response to that, the U.S. and Israel both say Lebanon was not included in the ceasefire, a misunderstanding, according to the vice president.
What we said is that the ceasefire would be focused on Iran, and the ceasefire would be focused on America's allies, both Israel and the Gulf Arab states. If Iran wants to let this negotiation fall apart in a conflict where they were getting hammered over Lebanon, which has nothing to do with them and which the United States never once said was part of the ceasefire, that's ultimately their choice. We think that would be dumb, but that's their choice.
Iran's foreign minister, he objects to that, writing this: the Iran-U.S. ceasefire terms are clear and explicit. The U.S. must choose ceasefire or continued war via Israel. It cannot have both. The world sees the massacres in Lebanon. The ball is in the U.S. court, and the world is watching whether it will act on its commitments. Iranian state media also reporting that Tehran has closed the Strait of Hormuz. This is a major point of contention and of disagreement right now. The U.S. and allies demand it remains open. Guys.
All right, Alexandria Hoff, live for us in Washington. Alex, thank you. Let's bring in.
So this is a game of who got the bigger balls. This is what this is coming out to be. I don't think that nothing is going to come up out of this. There is a strategy that Donald Trump can definitely take on with regards to this that I believe that should be readily considered. There is a win that he can get an ultimate win up out of this after he knocked down the power plants, right? This is going to require ground troops. I didn't understand the mechanism of how much ground troops were going to be needed in this whole ordeal. However, I am recognizing after doing some research, I do understand why now. Let me let them continue.
Chief Strategist of the Middle East Forum and former U.S. Army Special Forces member Jim Hansen. Jim, thank you so much for joining us. We got a little bit of clarity yesterday when it comes to the starting point for these negotiations with White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt. Listen here.
The Iranians originally put forward a 10-point plan that was fundamentally unserious, unacceptable, and completely discarded. It was literally thrown in the garbage by President Trump and his negotiating team. Many outlets in this room have falsely reported on that plan as being acceptable to the United States, and that is false.
Okay, so the plan that was widely reported, that was basically an Iranian wish list we can all throw out in the trash, but there are still a whole lot of daylight between the two sides here. The United States, Israel, and Iran. So given what we know so far, which is not a whole lot, how do you think negotiations are going to go this weekend?
One thing to consider about a ceasefire is it's not a peace deal. If we had all of this hammered out beforehand and the deal was ready, we wouldn't have to negotiate one. So I think the idea of a ceasefire is to stop shooting long enough that we can go ahead and start beating, the actual plan into shape. There is a lot of room between the two positions. I know the Iranian 10-point plan was wish casting on their part, and they didn't expect a lot of that. But they need to realize that President Trump is not going to cave or compromise in any way on the most important things: no nukes, no missiles, and no funding terror in the region. They're going to agree to those, or there will be no deal.
And also, Jim, the Strait of Hormuz, a major issue and really up in the air, with Iran saying they're blocking the strait because of Israel and Hezbollah. There's also this situation with the tolls, where Iran is charging tolls for ships to cross. And then President Trump yesterday said that this could ultimately be a joint venture between the U.S. and Iranians. So where do things go with the Strait of Hormuz?
It needs to open.
That joint venture is not about to happen if Donald Trump doesn't actually take more control of Iran. What needs to happen is there needs to be an agreement that this is becoming so big of an issue that Iran refuses. The thing I don't get about this, right, and I'm gonna digress for a minute, is for a country that has saw so much of what the Iranian has done to this people. Nah, let me stop right there, because I can go and take this to home. Listen, America almost lost its country, or is on the verge of losing its country, just depending on what is going to happen with regards to birthright citizenship. I taken a notice that at first I thought it might be a 5-4 issue, but I'm noticing three justices that I would consider is not going to go with this whole birthright citizenship, with regards to the whole idea of full allegiance, with regards to having to come back to the meaning in which it was ratified in 1868. But when you think of that, when you think about how the Iranian was treating its people and how America has treated black people ever since, just food for thought.
In one way or another. President Trump, I think, is giving the Iranians a little bit of hope, and say, hey, maybe we'll do a business deal together. That's 100% his way. Whether that stays in the end, I think it would be unpleasant for some people. But if we get to the point where the rest of the important things, the actual dangerous things, are agreed to, then a toll for ships going through there is not the worst thing in the world. I think that'll try to be negotiated away, though. It's not something we want to make as a precedent.
One thing that came out of the press briefing yesterday was that Caroline Leavitt confirmed that Iran had indicated that it would turn over its stocks of enriched uranium. Big deal. What do you think about that?
That's the biggest deal. I mean, they have, near bomb grade uranium, and we can't allow that. That's an intolerable situation. They're somewhere between 10 and 14 days from breakout with that. So we can't allow them to keep that. That was kind of the whole point of this. If they don't agree to give that, then we're going to have a big problem. But I don't see any reason for negotiations to happen unless they have actually agreed to do that. That would be the number one thing. And then everything else after that is a secondary notion. So that would be a tremendous win for the world, and the reason President Trump launched Operation Epic Fury.
Yeah, and on that point, endless opinions and criticism from both sides when it comes to how this war should go and where it's going. But I think one fundamental question that everybody should be asking themselves is if the United States is safer now as a result of what has taken place so far. How would you answer that question?
We are undoubtedly safer than before this began. The Iranians had a much greater capability to project power in the region, to cause trouble, to push their proxies, to do things. Now they're basically trying to stay alive. You know, they have no legitimate military weapons. All they have left are asymmetric things like suicide boats and other ways, you know, to cause major trouble. No doubt about that. But no Air Force, you know, no Navy, no legitimate threats that I think the military has done a tremendous job in neutralizing. And that right there is a major step forward for security in the region and for security around the world.
And this is why I get to what I believe the outcome was going to be for Iran was they were not going to be allowed to have a military ever again. Strategically, that, well, they may be able to have a military, but in terms of a navy, they won't be able to do that. In terms of a military, you know, that's possible. However, a navy is out of the question. The way they try to control the Strait of Hormuz, and just to do this little choke point, right? With the oil that it has for cargo, right, is amazing, because what you have there, right there, is you have, which, listen, this strategy by Iran is not nothing that has been taken on. Anything different that has not been taken on from any other country. Ethiopia used to do this, right? You know, you got the same problem with the Suez canals in a way, right? However, here they're trying to double dip. They want to make you pay for the oil that's coming out of the cargo, and then they want you to pay a toll through the Strait of Hormuz. That's double dipping, right? So if you were just smart enough, why don't you just have people pay the toll when they get the oil from out of your land anyway, right? The toll will be paid instead of you choking off this one point, seeming to get control. You want to now act like you're kind of like the police of the Middle East, because now that Lebanon is getting attacked, here you are. You want to break your peace deal. You want to break your ceasefire deal in order to continue your whole idea, whatever you want to have for Iran, because nobody is clear about that right now. Between the 15-point and the 10-point deal, I read the 10-point deal is, you know, ain't nobody going for that 10-point deal. Only way that we going to go for the 10-point deal is going in there and collecting their uranium. And they might want us to do that for their own safety reasons. You know what I'm saying? Because they don't know anybody else who can go in there and extract that stuff without causing some, you know, toxic issue for the country. So that may be one of the things that they can agree upon. But in terms of this whole idea with them being able to have a Navy ever again, that's not going to happen. And the U.S. thinking that it's not going to have to be involved in over there and that they could just leave it alone, that's not going to happen. Now, all that is happening is you got Donald Trump that much more interested with this whole joint venture thing. Okay. Y'all want to put a toll on. All right, well, let's do a joint venture. Oh, so now we got a way to invest over there. We got a way to stay over there and stay in control. And either y'all can agree with us or not, but now we want over there. So them putting this toll on this stuff, instead of applying it to the oil that is coming from their country in the first place, is another bad move by Iran.
And going back to something we were talking about previously, can you help us understand why the conflict between Israel and Hezbollah is still ongoing when Israel is supporting the ceasefire with Iran?
The problem is that Hezbollah is right on Israel's border. You know, the Litani River was agreed to be a dividing line, and Hezbollah is not supposed to be south of that. The government of Lebanon and the UN are supposed to enforce that. They failed to do so, and consequently, Hezbollah has their rocket launchers and other things right on Israel's border, shooting across that border and driving Israelis out of their homes. That's an intolerable situation from them. Now, that's a proxy of Iran, but it's also a completely separate issue between Hezbollah and Israel. And they have every right to go ahead and push them back far enough up north that they can't shoot rockets and destroy the lives and livelihood of the Israelis on the border.
It's going to be a big weekend and a very important 2 weeks. Jim Hansen live for us. Jim, thank you so much.
So this is the strategy that needs to happen, right? And this is going to be a hard thing. We're going to need ground troops in 2 different areas when it comes to this. We're going to need ground troops to take over Cargill, take over the oil. We're going to need the individuals. We're going to need ground troops to take over that little choke point in the Strait of Hormuz, clear that out the way. And we're going to have to regulate, not allow the Iranians to have a navy. And we're going to have to regulate to where we allow them to have some form of military, but I don't know. Right? They are going to be Germany doesn't have a military, but so it's like how that's going to be regulated. You got to give them some ability to protect themselves as a country. Yet, it's not going to be like it is right now. If you take over the choke point, right? And this is why this is a great opportunity for an alliance to come in. I don't think Israel is going to be in it no more. Now I think the United States is going to pretty much take over the whole thing. Even though Israel, they're going to try to find their way up in here somehow, some way, because, But if the United States can go up in there and take over Cargill by itself, which is going to be a very difficult thing. It's not going to be, there may be some loss of life in that whole process of that. And allow the American companies to go over there and take over that refinery. And then going over there and taking that refinery, we keep ground troops over there. We create a base over there with regards to that. It's going to be dangerous in a sense, but if we can control the point of allowing the Iranians to have a military, we take over the Strait of Hormuz just to give boats the insurance that they need, that when they go through that straits, it's going to, they're not going to be faced with any type of difficulty. And here we are. I saw a strategy last night on TV, which gave me the understanding of why the Strait of Hormuz needs to be taken over. I mean, not the entire strait, but on the Iranian border, that little choke point that Iranian particularly wants to tow. They have mines in the water and all type of stuff. You get rid of them mines. You get rid of them mines, and then you go over there and take over that choke point because it's affecting the world. Especially the places like California, who is in need of Iranian oil because all their refineries, probably except 3, are done. This is the new strategy, to me, that the Trump should take over. The Trump administration should take over. Just take over Cargill. If Israel want to help, let's go. You know what I'm saying? It'll give you the ability. You probably get attacked from 2 different ends, right? Which is the most. So, but you got to start somewhere. But Cargill needs to be taken over. That little 12 point at the Strait of Hormuz needs to be taken over. Knock down the Israeli power plants. And pretty much you would have to go against the whole country if you do that, though. So it's up and up against the whole thing with the power plants. Should we worry about knocking down the power plants? Or should we be more worried about taking over the strait at that low choke point and going to get Cargill? That would be the ultimate functional victory for the United States. Tiny Cross-H.U.G on the Trumped Up Live Show. Always remember, like, share, subscribe to the channel. It's a good day to be a soldier.
They said transformation was impossible. Faith, facts, and fire. Tiny Cross-H.U.G style.